Hello, Thomas Nelson. I'm Olivia Hagan. I'm a senior here at Thomas Nelson, and I want to pursue in the medical field. And this is Dr. Lindsay Blackman, and she's going to help me with my resume today.
Okay, so I'm just going to look over at your resume, and typically what I tell people is to try to make things concise. I usually like to see like your best stuff up at the top, because if I'm going through your resume and you're applying for medical school, there's going to be 500 resumes that I'm going to look through. So I'm going to tell people, put your most important stuff on the front page up at top. And I would try to keep things concise. So typically I like to see the education part towards the top, just because it kind of tells me like where you went to school, and I like that you included, your class rank and your GPA. For me personally, typically I kind of like it more bulleted, just because it's easier to read rather than like a narrative. I did this, I did that. Sometimes, just when you're scanning resumes, when you've got a lot, it's just easier just to see kind of the highlights that way.
Right. So like instead of having a big paragraph right here, just have bulleted skills.
Yeah, I might. And like I said, I kind of like the education towards the top, but that's just me personally. And then you've got a lot of awards. Obviously, you're very, very accomplished. I also tell people to try to put their biggest award at the top too. So like for me, I'm looking at all this stuff. You're a member of the FCA, you're in the PEP club, you were or are. You're obviously a really good leader. You've done a lot of stuff. But like, what's the most important accomplishment? Like, what would you say?
Probably GSP.
Okay, so I would probably just go ahead and put that at the top. I would totally agree with you that that's an awesome accomplishment, and it makes you stand out from a lot of kids your age. So, you need to highlight that and say bam, because otherwise it's going to get lost in this long list of other things. Yeah. And I think it's also okay too, if you've got the same award that's recurring, you're on the dean's list quite a bit, to even just, put it all in one category, like dean's list, fall of 2014 through fall of 2016 or something, just instead of listing out each time.
So it takes up less space.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any specific questions that you have, or?
I don't really know.
Okay.
I never really made a resume before. I kind of just threw this together because I had to
Okay.
apply to GSP and I had to have one.
Okay.
So I don't really I didn't know what I was doing really when I made it. But like the volunteer stuff, I don't really, do you have to have that on there? Is it really that important, or?
I think it's good, especially if there's a few things that, wow, you really put a lot of effort into. So if there's something that you've done for 4 years and you've been, the leader, and you've taken on all this initiative, I think that's important to highlight. And then even maybe do a narrative, like, let's say, for example, I don't know, let's pick one. Let's do this like a angel tree, and you just put angel tree over here, and then maybe like in a column over on the other side, you can put a narrative like what all you did and how many hours you spent. And, you do it brief, but people want to know, you've got all this stuff listed. I think what's more important for a medical school admissions committee is to kind of see that you didn't just do one thing here, 1 hour there, 1 hour there, but you stuck with something and you really, put a lot of yourself into it. And you spent a lot of time on it. And it wasn't just a one-time thing. Those are the more important items to highlight, I think.
Okay, so what kind of skills and abilities would you be looking for in an application to medical school?
So typically, I think people would like to see, a medical school admissions committee would like to see somebody that's worked with other people. I think that's really important, whether it's kids or grown-ups or your peers or whatever, it doesn't matter who, but just that you are able to communicate. And so whether that's through an activity or a leadership skill or a role within your school that you've worked with people. What else did we say? And I guess to go on, piggyback with that, that you are a person that can, I guess, do a big commitment in terms of like setting a goal, choosing a project, and continuing to work with that. So I think those are the more important things to highlight on your resume instead of things that you did here or there 1 or 2 times for a few hours. Pick the project or the activity or the sport that you've really put a lot of time into, and highlight that particular one. Other skills and abilities, obviously you have to be into science, right? Because that's what most of medical school is going to be about. But they like to see somebody that has something different, so some diversity, whether that's through a language or you're really into the arts or you travel or just anything that you can think of that makes you different than the normal science major, I think is going to help set you out as well.
Okay. And so what kind of like things would make you like pull my resume out of everybody else's?
So we kind of talked about your education. Of course, you want somebody that seems like that they've taken the hard classes and been successful with that, studied really hard for their ACT or their MCAT and done well. But otherwise, again, I think it's going back to somebody that's showed that they can take one activity and really put their heart and soul into it and kind of carry it through for several years. Medical school is a big commitment in terms of time and money, and there's going to be a lot of sacrifices that go into that. So that's what they want to see, is that you are able to carry through with something and not just do things here and there to kind of beef up your resume, but that you've really put your heart and soul into something and stuck with it for a while.
Okay. Well, thank you for all your help. I really appreciate it. And if there's any underclassmen that want help with their resume, I'd be happy to help you with all of her knowledge.